What are the things we value most about our modern world? Freedom, to enjoy ourselves, to argue and discuss, to express our views, to find things out, to read and write, and the science and technologies that make these possible. None of this happened by accident. These freedoms were won through courage and with vision in an extraordinary period of human history. It began in 17th century Europe. It was called the Age of Enlightenment. In the space of little more than a century, religious faith yielded to reasoned argument, and the power of aristocracy gave way to the power of knowledge. But it was a hard-won battle against the fierce opposition of a powerful church and ruthless monarchs. It laid the foundations for the modern world. Denis Diderot, who challenged the church's monopoly on knowledge, Our story of the Enlightenment begins in England in the late 17th century with Isaac Newton. He was the founder of modern science, which was to become the single greatest challenge to the power of the church. At the beginning of this period, most people's lives were based on obedience and belief. They obeyed the church, which told them to obey the king, who, it said, had been chosen by God. People believed what was in the Bible, not what they found out for themselves. And the Bible said that the earth and everything on it had been made by God only a few thousand years earlier, and that the first humans had been thrown out of paradise for disobeying God's word. But Isaac Newton declared that knowledge was acquired not by blind faith, but by observation, and that it could be found not just in the Bible, but in the world around us. He laid down universal rules for what we now call science, and one of those rules was that it was open to everybody. Newton had performed his experiment using a child's toy, something anybody could buy. And having done the experiment, Newton made this sketch of it.
So this is Newton's original sketch. And then this diagram was published in English in his book, The Optics. In the past, you had to be a very specialised scholar in order to understand what was in the Bible or what was in some esoteric Latin text. But an experiment like this could be repeated anywhere in the world. This was a new source of truth, a new source of knowledge. So ordinary people could use these scientific results to invent things, to make machines, to change the world, to control the world. So the people who understood and who were clever would take over from the people who'd been born into rich, aristocratic, wealthy families. So one of the very, very important things about the Enlightenment, as symbolised by experiments like this, is it's not just about what knowledge was gained, it's about who controls the knowledge.
Newton had established for the first time the scientific method, how all science is carried out to this day, that experiments must be published and must be able to be repeated anywhere in the world. 70 years later, the discoveries of science were to mount a direct and fundamental challenge to the Church's authority. But at the time, the Church believed that Newton's work endorsed God's power, and he was buried with great ceremony in Westminster Abbey, where England honours its heroes. Newton's funeral was thronged with admirers, including this man, Voltaire. He was the most fearless and prolific thinker and writer in France, a country which at the time brutally repressed any freedom of thought or expression.
Il a traversé tout le siècle des Lumières comme un véritable météore. Et c'est aussi et surtout l'homme qui a inventé la figure de l'intellectuel, c'est-à-dire de l'écrivain engagé dans tous les combats de son temps pour défendre la veuve, l'orphelin et toutes les victimes des crimes et horreurs judiciaires perpétrés par des régimes autoritaires.
Voltaire's crusades forced him to spend most of his life in exile, which is why he was in England. Newton's state funeral impressed him deeply. In France, only aristocrats were honoured in this way, and scientific investigation was strictly controlled by an intolerant Catholic Church.
Le plus grand combat de Voltaire, c'est incontestablement le combat pour la tolérance, et en particulier pour la tolérance religieuse. Il était horrifié par le fanatisme qui sévissait à son époque, et ce qu'il a trouvé en Angleterre, c'est un climat de tolérance religieuse où les différentes chapelles, les différentes confessions pouvaient coexister sans conflit, sans guerre. Une formule de ses lettres philosophiques résume admirablement cette tolérance qu'il a rencontrée en Angleterre. S'il n'y avait en Angleterre qu'une religion, son despotisme serait à craindre. S'il n'y en avait que deux, elles se couperaient la gorge. Mais il y en a 30 et elles vivent en paix et heureuses.
And this was only one of the freedoms Voltaire found in England. 40 years earlier, Britain's absolute monarchy had been forced by its people to concede some elements of democracy and political representation.
Depuis le Bill of Rights de 1689, la séparation des pouvoirs exécutifs, législatifs et judiciaires était consacrée en Angleterre.
The king's powers were limited by parliament, judges and civil servants.
Le roi ne pouvait lever d'impôts, édicter de lois, ni faire la guerre sans un vote du Parlement. Et ce régime dans lequel les trois pouvoirs s'équilibraient était évidemment favorable à la liberté, beaucoup plus favorable que le modèle absolutiste français dans lequel le roi exerçait la totalité des pouvoirs.
In England, Voltaire also found the freedom that to him was the greatest of all.
De toutes les autres libertés, Voltaire l'a bien vu, la meilleure arme que l'esprit ait contre la tyrannie, c'est la plume. En instaurant la liberté d'expression, on ouvre un espace public de débat contradictoire, un espace où la nation tout entière peut confronter ses idées, suggérer des réformes, proposer des améliorations du gouvernement. Et c'est en conquérant la liberté d'expression qu'on pourra conquérir les autres libertés.
Voltaire dedicated the rest of his life to the crusade for freedom of speech and of the pen, in 20,000 letters and dozens of novels and plays. But all of this could only be dreamed of in the France of Voltaire's day. Here, subversive ideas about equality, liberty and freedom of speech had to be exchanged behind closed doors, in salons like the one shown here, where the bust of Voltaire, as usual still in exile, was honoured with pride of place.
Frankreich im 18. Jahrhundert war das, was wir heute ein repressives Regime nennen würden. Und tatsächlich Menschen, die etwas diskutieren wollten, die Ideen diskutieren wollten, die vom Staat nicht sanktioniert waren, mussten zu so einem Ort kommen wie diesem, zu einem Salon. Voltaire hat seine Karriere in so einem Salon begonnen und dort haben sie neue Ideen, Ideen von einer unglaublichen Radikalität diskutiert und entworfen und haben tatsächlich eine ganz neue Weltordnung geplant.
Despite its repressive laws, Paris was becoming a prosperous and exciting city, a magnet for ambitious young men from the provinces, hoping to succeed by their wits. One of them was this man, Denis Diderot. Unlike Voltaire, Diderot wasn't a member of the aristocratic elite. His great work was France's first encyclopedia, the Engine of the Enlightenment. But he'd barely begun when another of his works was noticed by the king's censors.
(1749) fand sich Diderot in einer Zelle im Château de Vincennes, vielleicht in dieser. Er hatte es gewagt, ein Buch zu schreiben, in dem er behauptete, Wissen käme von den Sinnen, nicht aus göttlicher Offenbarung. Für den König war das Provokation genug, um ihn hier festzusetzen. Obwohl Diderot im Hochsommer festgenommen wurde, brachte ihm sein Kerkermeister jeden Tag 2 Kerzen. Nach einigen Tagen sagte er dem Kerkermeister, er könne sie wieder mitnehmen, er brauche das nicht, das Licht sei gut, es sei Sommer. Aber der Kerkermeister sagte ihm, behalte sie, du wirst sie vielleicht während der langen Winterabende brauchen. Erst da wurde ihm klar, dass er hier vielleicht saß für Monate, Jahre, je nachdem, wie lange der König ihn behalten wollte.
But the worst thing about imprisonment for Diderot was that it was keeping him from the great project of his life, the Encyclopédie, which he'd barely begun when he was thrown into jail. His idea was to bring together the finest minds of the day and produce a series of books that would include not only philosophy and ideas, but also craft and trade skills, explained in every detail. Until then, useful knowledge like this hadn't been thought worth recording. But Diderot and his colleagues sought out the ordinary people, to whom nobody had previously listened.
Die Behandlung der handwerklichen Tätigkeiten selbst war ein Programm der Enzyklopädie. Es hat die Handwerke sehr aufgewertet in einer Zeit, in der eigentlich nur Aristokraten einen Wert hatten. Und das kommt natürlich auch daher, Diderot kam aus Langres, also eigentlich aus der Provinz, aus der Champagne. Und da war sein Vater ein Messerschmied, der hat Klingen geschmiedet und war sehr gut in seinem Beruf, wollte eigentlich auch, dass sein Sohn ihm nachfolgt. Aber er hat es eine Woche lang probiert und er hat es wirklich nicht gewollt und er hat es wirklich nicht gekonnt. Aber er war stolz auf seinen Vater. Er war stolz auf das Handwerk, er war stolz darauf, dass jemand etwas mit seinen Händen produzierte. Und das ist natürlich auch genau das Gegenteil von den Priestern und Aristokraten, die Frankreich tatsächlich beherrschten.
Even imprisonment didn't discourage Diderot as he planned his Encyclopédie, nor did it tone down his radical intentions. But he realized it would outrage the authorities, especially the church.
Sie durften nicht zu subversiv sein. Man muss sich erinnern, damals wurden Menschen nicht nur eingesperrt für das, was sie sagten, sie wurden tatsächlich auch noch hingerichtet, manchmal wahnsinnig grausam hingerichtet.
With the stakes this high, Diderot had to be ingenious in outwitting the censors.
Hier zum Beispiel ist das Système de Connaissance, also eigentlich das System des ganzen Wissens. Und wenn Sie sich das ansehen, dann sehen Sie, ganz oben ist die Theologie. Das haben die Zensoren sicherlich gemocht.
But right below religion is black magic. Even the sequence of entries in his Encyclopédie held hidden meaning. His world had no place for belief in any god at all. He hid his attacks on the church throughout the whole work, even in a system of cross-references, like one which links the Eucharist with cannibalism. His wit and daring attracted friends as well as enemies, and luckily for Diderot, they included the king's mistress, Madame de Pompadour. She was even painted with her own copy of the Encyclopédie. With such friends in high places, after 3 months in prison, Diderot was released. The king and the censors had realized that Diderot's great project had become an industry in itself, and potentially a very profitable one. Despite continuing harassment from the church, Diderot and his colleagues were consumed for the next 26 years in bringing their great work into being. There were 20 million words in 28 volumes, and every letter of every word had to be set by hand. Hundreds of typesetters, tanners, printers and bookbinders were involved.
Diderot hatte einen hohen Preis bezahlt für seine Arbeit an der Enzyklopädie. Er war 3 Monate eingesperrt gewesen, aber in 1751 konnte er sie endlich in seinen Händen halten. Da war der Tome Premier und es war ein gigantischer Erfolg. Und tatsächlich einerseits seine Inhaftierung und andererseits die Enzyklopädie selbst machten ihn zu einem berühmten Mann, erreichten also das, was er wollte. Er bekam einen Brief von Voltaire, der ihm gratulierte, der ihn den modernen Sokrates nannte.
Diderot's vast enterprise finally achieved his ambition, bringing respect and recognition to ordinary people. But most of them had little chance of reading about it.
The Encyclopédie was a very expensive book. It actually cost something like 980 livres, which, if you put that into the context of the time, a skilled artisan, if he was lucky, might earn something like 15 livres in a week. So he could never have afforded this. It was mostly bought by members of the social elite, the crème de la crème.
And even for those who could, buying any book remained a risky business.
Something like half the books that were published in France during the 18th century were banned books. They were sold under the counter secretly, and even the Encyclopédie was banned for a number of years. But Diderot said, a book banned is a book read.
Diderot realized that the controversy was helping to publicize the Encyclopédie. And despite the risks, its success started a huge boom in publishing at the time. The excitement of access to ideas, to information, to the wider world consumed society at all levels, as even ordinary people learned to read. Diderot's great dream of giving all knowledge to the world was becoming reality. But the Church was fighting back. Its supreme leader, the Pope, condemned the Encyclopédie and ordered it burned. He declared that any Catholic who dared to read it would face eternal damnation.